Hershey, you never know what he's doing. Whether he's just a little bit bored or playing around to the cameras or something, but certainly didn't look like he was being dropped, just perhaps a lapse of concentration, or perhaps been back to the team car, getting those final instructions before they went up to the lead-in two to have a word with Mark Hershey. Just little words of encouragement, a knowing look from Pavel Sivakov, looking across to who will be a DS for him next year.
Back with the second group on the road. Calzone, Q36 rider, taking his turn on the front.
See the fatigue within that group. Calzone almost unable to speed up to come through to do his turn. Yusenko always rolls the gear slightly, but looked like he was rolling it a little bit more than normal. So yeah, plenty of fatigue in the legs of the riders behind. Two team cars now. Looks like the two DSs having a word, perhaps trying to plot things out. How they can possibly get back to the front of this bike race? But right now it's perhaps a little more than just tactics. It's what the riders have got left in the tank at this point.
The gap did drop by a few seconds, but as we saw, Hershey was having a chat with the team car. So we'd expect maybe a few seconds to drop there, and just a couple of kilometers or so until these two leading riders are back on the climb into Peccioli for the final time. Those 1.4 kilometers to the top at 5.6%. And now it is really just head down, get this section out of the way. Wonder if they'll actually enjoy the climb a little more than these big wide open roads. Maybe not, but this sort of terrain really suiting Sivakov. He can use his size, his power on this section. He's certainly doing that. Hershey taking another turn. Very contrasting styles at the moment between the two riders. Not going to read too much into that. The gap out to 50 seconds again.
Yeah, looking at the two riders, it did look like Sivakov was the strongest on the climb last time up, but right now on this flat section, looks like Hershey still got some good leg speed versus Sivakov just rolling the gear ever so slightly more. It's normally a telltale sign of kind of how fresh a rider feels as such. So yeah, Hershey looks like he's still got some good leg speed in there, perhaps just bluffing ever so slightly with these shorter turns and thinking about the final climb, thinking about this next climb even, not wanting to let Sivakov slip away perhaps with one lap remaining.
Well, our leaders approaching the climb, about a kilometre or so into Peccioli. We've seen it once already. Hairpins on the way up into the town. We get a bit of support as well. Quite a bit of this race is not ideally suited for spectators to get involved, but once we hit the climb, you get that little bit of encouragement, which I'm sure always helps as well. So 13.5 to go, and now we start to go back up the climb into Peccioli. Came at me a little bit quicker than I was expecting there, but
yeah, now we're on that finishing circuit, only 12.2 kilometres per lap. It comes round pretty quickly once they've got this climb out of the way. It's a very fast descent which knocks off a few kilometres rather quickly. Then that flat section, it seems as though it dragged on the previous lap, but this time round it looks like they've got across it pretty quickly, working well together. As we see once again Hershey, just ever so subtle movements on the bike, not desperate to come through to do his turn, gets up out the saddle, stretch the legs, stretch the back ever so slightly, and Sivakov just sits there pushing away these enormous watts that we know he's got, rounding one of those hairpins and making their way up to the next hairpin. Hershey looking down, just checking the speed, checking the watts, no doubt. Just yeah, Feels like there's a lot of fatigue build up within the riders' legs at this point.
Well, there would be after nearly 190 kilometres of racing. See a few greats of Italian cycling on the banner there.
Yeah, I was looking back at previous winners of this race. It's got an unbelievable palmares.
Some list, isn't it?
It is. I just noted down Moser, Bugno, Fondriest, Chiappucci, Rees, Taffy, Schmiel, Bettini, Ulrich, Gilbert, Rico, Colbrelli. I know a few of those have got a little asterisk next to their name within the results, yes, but it's still a huge name list of riders. So it shows kind of the history of this race.
Race first ran in 1952. Moser taking the win in 1978 as we, these leading two that have got nearly a minute again, and they'll take the bell. I think it was the 2019 edition that when Lutsenko won, there was a rider that got the count wrong. I think it's fair to say, but no danger for these two. They know it's just over 12 kilometres. They've got a minute to play with. Clearly the strongest two riders in the race. The group behind, not going to close them in now. Now we start to think about how it's going to play out here now. We know that Hershey's has got a good uphill sprint on him, as you've been saying, Ian, but does Sivakov try, a little bit like he did yesterday, very different terrain to the finish, to try and get ahead of Hershey a little bit earlier and make it not come down to a sprint? Any guesses on what we might see playing out on the final lap?
Interesting move from Carapaz here, just over the top of this penultimate climb, using oh, he didn't think it was the finish, did he?
Well, I hope not. Did seem to get a bit of a shock at when he looked across to the bell.
Oh no, I think he might have thought that was the last lap.
He might have done, yeah. He was giving it a really big dig, wasn't he? Just towards the line, and thinking third place might be up, and they sort of dropped off immediately.
Yeah, I was just commenting that thought big attack, perhaps the final moment to, yeah, kind of break this group up into a smaller working group and take the strongest riders away to form kind of a smaller group that could work together to try and close this gap down across this final lap. But as it turns out, it looks like he might have just thought that was the final lap and that they were racing for, yeah, the final spot on the podium.
Well, timely after me just mentioning that if it was 2019 where we saw that happen. Maybe we'll find out after the race. So with under 11 to go, Hershey takes his turn on the front, and this, as we've been saying, as you've seen, long drag back. It's pretty flat until we hit the climb again for the final time. And this group has started to spread out a little bit, as you'd expect on the descent. Carapaz just a little bit further back right now after expending pretty heavy effort, it's fair to say. What was the penultimate run into Peccioli?
The one thing that has done is knocked 15 seconds very quickly off that time gap between the leading group and now these three riders, Martin, Lutsenko and Pogačar, just well spotted. That motorbike stopped on the left-hand side of the road. Yeah, Pogačar just marshalling things. So, but that gap falling, and interesting that the leading two riders, this is the moment on this long flat section. I'm sure they're going to be very wary of attacks coming from each other, not wanting to expend too much energy on this flat run-in before that final climb. So perhaps a very small glimmer of hope for those chasing riders, perhaps, but I wouldn't have thought these two leading riders would be silly enough to let that gap fully close. And with Pogačar on the back of these two, it's going to kind of discourage them ever so slightly, giving 100% to the chase.
Well, on these roads as well, they can see the gap as well. They can see the cars, the bikes, and Pogačar will just no doubt disrupt things a little bit and maybe not take his time. Is that him looking across to where the two leaders are? I think it is.
Yeah, they take a really hard left-hand turn, and the riders have been able to look across and see exactly where that leading duo is. But conversely, the leading duo will be able to look back and see how much closer the chasing trio are compared to the previous lap. I'm sure that will give them a little bit of emphasis to keep driving this one a little bit longer before they start looking at each other before that final climb. I'd have thought, looking at the different riders in the lead of this one, Sivakov will probably want to go a little bit longer than Hershey, try and wind it up from a long way out and drop Hershey before that final kind of 100 metres up to the line where it really kicks. Will be a wind coming from the rider's left-hand shoulder in the final few 100 metres as they make that final turn. So I'd have thought whoever's on the front will stay pinned up against the barriers on the right-hand side of the road, the rider's right-hand side of the road, the left-hand side of the road, as the finishing camera will look at it. So some subtle tactics to take into account if it does come down to those final 100 metres.
Just a little rise here. It's one of the only little bumps in this section before we hit the climb. 8 kilometers to go. Sivakov looking to double up here this weekend. It's not the weekend, is it? It's been Wednesday, Thursday. So used to sport being on the weekends. So there's the main bunch. And well back now, just on a gentle ride in towards the finish. Over 5 minutes back now. If Sivakov takes it, he'll take the little bonus prize that's on offer for winning the best place rider in terms of points from the yesterday's race and today's race. The Challenge Toscana Memorial Alfredo Martini. 50 points for a win yesterday. 50 points for a win again today, and I think 1,500 euros I think is the prize for that one. The best place rider over the 2 races. 7 to go.
Does look like Martin and Lysenko a little bit more keen and energised on this lap now that they've shed some of the other riders from this chase group. And we see that gap falling further down to 34 seconds. So there was some games going on in that chasing group. They weren't all on their knees as perhaps I initially thought. So a little bit more energy left in the tank, and yeah, that gap coming down. But as you can see, still a long way on the actual road due to the fast, flat nature of the running.
And that group of 3 still got Pogačar in there, who may just make it a little tricky. I think it's all going to come down to Lysenko and Martin if they want to have any chance at all. 35 seconds and 6.2 to go. But these two, they'll be on the radio. They'll be aware. Well, it's going to be interesting to see just how both of these riders approach the final climb. And as you said, if Sivakov is going to try and go for a long one, go early. Back to group 2, still 36 seconds back. Pogačar just on the 3rd wheel. Guillaume Martin, shoulders down, driving hard. But we're running out of road if they want to catch up. I think it's unlikely, but as you said, Ian, there's just a tiny chance if they could get organised. But it's really 2 riders that are doing the work here.
Yeah, two against 2 as such, and just in the final bit of headwind section of this circuit, it looked like Sivakov perhaps had got the word from the team car that the gap was coming down, because it looked like he was doing a bit of an extra longer more sustained kind of turn on the front, but it looks like now they have made that left-hand turn at that final roundabout, so they will have a crosswind all the way back now. We can see our finishing town in the distance up on top of the hill, and so they'll just have a crosswind section all the way now until 1.4 kilometers to go, where they make that sharp left-hand turn to start that climb. It looks like right now, yeah, 36 seconds, stabilizing, almost 500 meters on the road. That's going to discourage anyone from trying to jump across on this final section. It looks like, yeah, kind of impetus just beginning to wane ever so slightly in this chase group, but still final podium place up for grabs within this group.
See Guillaume Martin looking for somebody to come through, and of course that man was Luchenko. Third place is 1,360 euros in this race, and 5,443 to the winner, 2,724 to second place. That's the, for those of you that want to know the prize money. Well, as you said, Ian, the gap has stabilised, 35, 36 seconds. It's going to come down to these two, and it's going to be an interesting tactical battle. They've been out on their own for much of the last 25 kilometres or so. It's a big, big effort that both of them have had to make, and under 4 to go. Coming towards the climb for the last time. Be time to get that liquid on board and discard the bottles. See what's coming up ahead on this section. Back to the chasing group: Luchenko, Martin, Pogacar. Guillaume Martin has put a big, big effort. It's not going to surprise me one bit if we see on the climb Pogacar just launch off and try and grab third place.
Yeah, I'm sure the armchair ride he's had over the last 25 kilometres from this chasing group, he should be the freshest of the three come the final 200-300 metres, and yeah, you'd say absolute almost perfect finish for Pogacar up a short steep climb to the line, but don't rule out Martin or Luchenko, both punchy fast finishers when they want to be.
Well, all of the favourites that we thought would be in the mix today have lived up to their billing. But it's man of the moment, Pavel Sivakov, in some sublime form, that is in with a chance of taking back-to-back wins here in Tuscany. But Mark Hirschi sat out yesterday's race, didn't defend the Giro della Toscana that he won in 2022. Maybe is just slightly fresher. He was over in Canada as well, as was Sivakov. There's a lot of travel, a lot of time in the saddle for all of these riders at this stage of the season, unless you're one of the riders that's taking a little bit of a break over the summer, of course. Well, under a kilometre till we hit the climb. Peccioli is looming in the not so distant future. It's just up ahead right now. You can see the last stretch of this flat bit of road, and then we'll start the climb.
Yeah, the nerves will be kicking in for these front two riders now. Just obviously you feel the anxiety building towards the end of a bike race like this. You both know what the situation is. You both know what's coming up. You've done multiple laps of this finishing circuit. You know exactly what you've got to contend with come the final 2 kilometres of this race. You're just hoping you can play your cards right.
Well, here we go. Climb up ahead. Who is going to take the win in the 71st Coppa Sabatini? The town of Peccioli coming out to support this race, as it does every year. Sivakov and Hirschi are going to battle for the win. They've got 30 seconds to play with. Also, Hirschi sitting on Sivakov's wheel. How is he going to play this one? he's got a good sprint on him on those uphill finishes. Sivakov, a powerful rider. Is he going to go for the long approach? Or have they both just got nothing left and we're just going to see it play it out to a sprint? Well, the chasing group have stepped up the pace ever so slightly. Lutsenko on the front right now. Pogačar, perhaps the man to watch here, given he has been just taking it as easy as a professional cyclist can in this situation. Doing a great job for his teammate Mark Hirschi up in front. And a shame to lose Carapaz from the group as well, after we think, got to stress think, that he perhaps thought the last lap through was actually the final lap. Well, here we go, Ian, prediction time. Who's your man?
I'm going to go for the man in form, Sivakov.
Well, I'll go Hirschi then, just to make it interesting between the two of us.
Perfect.
Where's the fun in me picking Sivakov as well? Well, just see that little look over the shoulder. Less than 1,000 meters to go. A few little cat and mouse games perhaps, but it's been such a big effort from these two riders. Nearly 200 kilometers of racing, over 2,500 meters of climbing. Coming down to the final 800 meters or so. They don't want to mess around too much, because there's some seriously powerful riders still behind. And Hirschi watching Sivakov like a hawk. Sivakov looking down the roads just for the next group. Where are those chasers? Unfortunately, we're probably not going to see much of what happens with the chase group. We'll see them on the line. Hirschi takes his turn on the front. It's not really taking turns at this stage. It's all about the tactics. And is this the moment Sivakov tries to distance Hirschi? Hirschi straight back on his wheel. I think, Ian, that was the moment now that Sivakov might have tried to go early.
Yeah, he had to try and play it long. He just kind of held off, laid off the wheel ahead of him and tried to rush into the gap and get a little gap on Hirschi. But yeah, that doesn't look good in terms of Sivakov winning this one. Hirschi covered that one, looked really quite easy for him. As see Sivakov going once again.
Well, Sivakov goes and Hirschi right back on his wheel. He was taking slightly shorter turns, and he's now getting a tow, and Sivakov looking over his shoulder. Hirschi's got a good sprint on him, but Sivakov can produce some big watts when he needs it. Now Hirschi just drifting across. It gets a little steeper. Hirschi kicks. Sivakov matches him as well. Sivakov hogging those boards on the left-hand side of the road. And Mark Hirschi now out in front. You can see the finish line. Sivakov's not got it today. It's going to be Mark Hirschi, Team UAE Emirates, who takes the Coppa Sabatini. And it means, Ian, that you're buying the coffees.
Yeah,
here's the next group coming through. And it is that Pogačar on the front. He can ride anything, and he's going to come through and take third place. Kind of like we predicted. A couple of days.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's exactly as we see. Replay. The sprint was already done at this point. Hirschi had gapped Sivakov coming out of that final corner, almost uncontested in the end. Such was the turn of speed, the kick that Hirschi had left over that final 150 meters from that final corner. But yeah, as I was saying, Pogačar will be very pleased with kind of 2 days' work. I'm sure it's almost exactly where he wants to be, coming back from a small break and then a small training block into these first set of races. Got another couple of Italian races lined up before he heads to Lombardy, where I'm sure he'll want to try and take yet another monument.
Richard Carapaz crossing the line there. He went hard on the last lap, maybe thinking that was the final lap. But here's the moment again. Here she's celebrating a great victory. It's another podium for Sivakov. What a bad habit to have, hitting the podium in the last few races. Well, here we see, Ian, well, you're the expert, you take us through it.
Yeah, Sivakov just tried to kick before that final corner, but yeah, to no avail, and Hirschi was able to come round him, carry his speed through that final turn, and Yeah, as I say, no real contest in the end. Very fast finishing Hershey, managed to get the better of Sivakov. Whether Sivakov just feeling it in the legs from yesterday a little bit, seemed to be the stronger rider, doing those longer turns over the course of the final 25 kilometres. But yeah, come the end, the faster finisher on paper took it in the end. Pogacar rounds out the podium with Matin fourth, Lusenko fifth. I think Calzoni might have come in for sixth ahead of Carapaz. Seen off camber perhaps, but it'd be really interesting to see whether Carapaz was